Hey everyone, I am working on this dresser and I wanted to make a recorded video tutorial for you as I'll be working on a piece of furniture. So we're gonna do some Raku on this piece. This is a redo from the original finish that I had on it because it's just been sitting for a long time, so it's time to just redo. So to prep it, I've cleaned it, I sanded it just to kind of take some of that top coat off so that my finish will stick and adhere the way I want it to. All right, so my plan for this is a little bit different. I want to try something a little bit different. So I've got some stencils. I found these on Amazon. They're kind of just like an animal print stencil. And I'm going to use the larger stencil on the base and then work up into this smaller pattern stencil. And then we'll kind of just play off the existing texture that's already been laid down onto this piece. And we'll go from there. So the bottom is going to be like a really heavy, dark kind of, I might add a little color, but it'll be just real dark with the pattern. And then we'll kind of come up into a bunch of colors and make it really bright and fun. So that is my plan for it. I'm gonna take you all along and show you how I'm doing it, what I'm doing, if there's things that are a little bit different than, you know, the workshops, then I'll explain that and why. And I think this is gonna be kind of fun. So let's get started. We're gonna flip this, round number 2. I used Wise Owl Earth and Salt Wash to create the base stencil. All right, so we've got our big stencil done. Now I'm gonna add the smaller stencil. I just think this would be kind of a cool texture. I kind of want it to look like crackled glass, or like a crackled glaze, but have a little bit of a pattern to it. So that's kind of my thought process behind using these stencils instead of just kind of creating my own organic pattern. I think it will also play nicely into the Raku finish with the raised areas, and then the areas they're not, especially if we do some drips, it's gonna kind of go into the crevices, which I think will look really cool. Let's keep going. I'm gonna go all the way around the bottom of the dresser like this, kind of fade it up, okay? So let's do it. Okay, so we've got all of that texture on, and now I just want to kind of blend this a little bit. So all I've done is put a little bit of the earth and salt wash mixture onto my little dollar store broom. You could use a paintbrush as well, but I just already have this sitting here, so that I'd use it. And then I'm just going to press some of this texture just away from the design and kind of let it fade out. And I can even bring my broom a little bit into the design and kind of create that texture so it really easily transitions. So I'm just gonna bring this onto the leg here. And my paint is still a little bit wet, so I can kind of manipulate that stencil a little bit, soften up the edges. Okay. Yeah, see how that just kind of softens it a little bit. Our texture's all dry, and so we are going to start with our base. So we build our base, and then we build color off of that, right? So I am going to use carbon on the bottom, kind of coming up, and then I've got ivory that I'm going to use on the top. We'll kind of meet them a little bit in the middle, and then we will start adding some color. Going to add some color, and I'm gonna try something a little bit different. I've had a color on my mind for quite a while, a new color on my mind for quite a while, and I haven't had a chance to sit down and mix it up. So I am going to kind of paint down the colors I think it will take to create it and see if I can kind of get that hue I want. What I'm going for is a nice warmness right here that will really draw your eye to the center of the piece, and then maybe kind of drip it down a little bit and then bring in some more color. So what I pulled out to make this is most of it's Wiesel. I have 1 or 2 colors I may add in from Daydream Apothecary. These are really cool neon colors. They're super, super intense. All right, they take a little bit more to cover because they're so highly pigmented, but they're really cool. So I am going to add in some of this orange. It's called Sundance. I've got a little bit of Mandarina, which is a darker orange. See how much darker that is. I've got some Rocksteady and a little bit of Native Clay and chocolate. So that's kind of what I'm going to start with and play with and see if I can get the color I want. If not, then we'll see what it does and go from there. It is intense. A little bit scary to lay it down on this because this is real pretty, but it doesn't get pretty until you make it ugly first. Okay, so we're just going to kind of lightly fade that out. We're going to be layering several colors here, so I'm going to layer down this one. I'm going to create that nice fade out and flow. All right, so we're just going to kind of get that base in there, and then I'm just bringing it down a little bit. This is really just to provide warmth. Okay, so it's obviously a very, very intensely warm base. I'm gonna actually pull a little bit up in here because I can see, you know, light reflects, right? And it bounces off of things. And I feel like if there was a shade here, which there kind of is, then let's say there's water or some kind of element down here, it's gonna take that intense and kind of bounce it up and just slightly reflect on an overhang. It's gonna be very subtle. I mean, this is way more, I'm putting down way more than is actually going to show. And we are just going to, not a lot of pink. I'm not gonna show a lot of pink in this piece. But I do need a little bit to lay down to create that base. So we're gonna pull a little bit into it of our hot Rocksteady. That's gonna be really freaking cool. Okay, come here for a second. I wanna show you all this. So it's gonna be awesome, you know. But one thing I want you to think about is don't be afraid to use those hot colors, okay? I really am liking the warmth this is adding. So I'm thinking I'm gonna add, later on down the road, I'll add a little bit of drip too. Let's bring in some Mandarina, and I think we're gonna bring some Mandarina in here and then kind of just warm that area up, and then it will kind of fade into our brighter colors. Okay, so you can see that darker, more intense orange. That's where we're gonna come and bring this up here. Kind of creating that warm base. And then we're just gonna kind of pull that in to our darker base. If I want it to be a little bit thicker, I'm going to stipple it, okay? So if I want more of that orange color to be very intense and show, I'm going to stipple it because that's going to keep it, give more full coverage, okay? And I'm just kind of lightly stippling it in to our hot pink. Because remember, I'm trying to kind of create the illusion of an actual color by layering several colors. It's time to add in my favorite, Native Clay. And I am just continuing to use the same brush. And I'm gonna go down, and then I'm gonna slowly kind of work my brush up and just really start to lightly blend the Native Clay over the top See how that's kind of starting to darken there? Getting more intense. Okay, here's our mandarina without, and then this has got this native clay over the top. So I'm gonna bring this down, starting in the darker areas, and slowly kind of just fade it up until I get the color that I am really hoping to achieve. I'm just taking what I have and offloading my brush and working it upwards so it gives a little bit of that smoky effect. I thought I would start with another Daydream Apothecary color. This one is the blue. It's called Four Boys Blue. I love that. That's super cute name. All right, it's really, I mean, just super, super, super bright. So here's our Sapphire. That's kind of in comparison, right? So I'm gonna start with a little bit of the Four Boys Blue, and then we will bring in our Sapphire around the edges. So I'm gonna start probably just right here. This is the same, it's a neon, so it's not gonna have, you know, a one coat coverage, but it's going to give some really intense blue, which I think is really quite beautiful. So I'm gonna add a little bit of that in. Let's look at this. Let me turn you so you can see that. Okay, see how that's gonna bring that coolness? And then you kind of have to envision, you know, when you're smoking it out, when you're adding that chocolate, it's going to balance out really nicely. The really warm and the cool. So let's do the same over here. Need a little, I don't have much of my lid today, so we'll pull it out of the can. And then we'll just kind of blend it up. And I'm doing the same thing. I'm just doing those little swirls. My left hand doesn't do them as well as my right. But we'll just kind of get that blue to start giving us some background color. But down in here, I want a lot of color to kind of come through. So I don't want to completely cover this. I still want some of this really pretty orange, you know, to show through. And then when I come in and I add my shading, the dark, and kind of smoke this out, it will fade from a really dark into this light kind of golden orange color. And then we can add our metallics into it. So I feel like this is gonna create a really nice base to start adding some chocolates and browns too. Okay, I'm gonna lay down this blue. Oh, I've got paint in my hair or something. Anyway, I thought, okay, I'm gonna lay down this blue and it's gonna be awful, but it's really freaking cool. I just put it on my lip. It's nice. It comes off. Anyway, I really like the blue. I like it with, I like all of it. I think it's gonna work. You know what, even no matter how many times you do it, no matter how many times I've done Raku, no matter how many times I have a vision of what I'm gonna do and I slowly make it work, it changes, and I'm always learning. Even right now, I'm like, oh, I don't know, like this is scary to combine different colors than I've done in a class that I'm teaching, but YOLO, why not? Let's do it. So I'm gonna continue adding in this blue. I'm really digging it and I think it's cool. And you know, if it didn't work, I would still show it to you and I would tell you how I'm gonna fix it. And maybe in the end, I'll end up covering up more of it. But let's just go with it and see where it takes us and explore this journey together. Dude, that's wicked. That's really cool. Yeah, I'm really digging it. I think it's gonna be cool. I love the texture, And imagine when we get this texture popping, I know it's a little bit hard to see, you can see it a little bit down there. When we get some of that metallic in that texture, this is gonna be cool. I'm excited. I'm gonna take a break from the front and let it sit for a bit to decide exactly what I want. We're gonna come to the side because I love the blue so much and I like the way that it's kind of interacting with the other colors. I'm gonna add some Sapphire first. You can see how much more intense, especially now that this is painted on, how much more intense Sapphire is than this. It's much more lighter, the Four Boys Blue is, but the Sapphire is just such a killer, and I feel like an integral part of a Raku finish that I need to add it. So we are going to add it in the blend, and then we'll bring in some of the Four Boys Blue as well. So I'm just gonna start stippling it on and then bringing some flow. Ooh, that was like a high-pitched weird sound. All right, so let's bring in, fade this out, and then kind of bring in some flow. So basically I'm kind of coming downward, right? I think we should bring the Sapphire down a little bit more this way. So we're just gonna stipple it and then we'll blend it out. Okay, so here's where we're at. I've got my Sapphire coming down the side. I've kind of given a little bit of flow and pattern, as you can see, which I think it nicely ties in with the side because then I can bring the Sapphire up. So it'll come down and then I'll bring it up and over, and I've hit my arm like 3 times with the paintbrush. This is fine. Okay, so I don't want to cover up all of my blue because I really like that color. So I'm just gonna come in right here, kind of at the edge, and I'm just gonna kind of blend it in. And I'm also gonna just blend it out to the edge. Let's just kind of bring it right here. And let that drip. I think this will bring out some more balance to some of the warmth and even some of the just dry brush areas down here. And let's pull this down. But it won't completely cover it. So it's almost like adding a glaze, right? Because it's just gonna be really subtle. But it still gives enough color that kind of gives a iridescent blue illusion to it. So it's almost like, you know, when a flame gets hot, right? It's kind of a yellow orange, then it turns to a purpley blue. When it gets that really intense blue color, the flame is hot, like hot, 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 right? And so that's kind of where we're gonna go with this. So we've got some intense flames, some color that's occurred because of it. We've got some blue that's really intense flame. It's like really smoking down here. Once this all dries, then we'll come back in with our carbon or black and chocolate, and we'll kind of smoke it and smolder the bottom. But I'm gonna let a little bit more of the Sapphire show through than I have before. And I think this will intensify the effect, and then it will also give more of a balance between this really cool blue and this really hot, bright orange. And we want it to make sense, right? Make it make sense. We don't want it to be 2 separate pieces. We want it to be that this part got so hot and smoking and smoldered that it is just smoldering with a really intense flame, and then we're getting up to this warm, kind of intense, fiery effect, okay? So that's kind of like I'm processing how this would occur if I was firing a piece of Raku pottery and trying to relate that onto a piece of furniture. So I'm gonna add a little bit of warmth into the center. We're gonna use Mandarina first. And I may use the that other orange, the Sundance color. But I'm gonna first start with Mandarina and kind of see where that takes us, because ultimately we want this to be like a smoky, chocolatey, warm, rusty area, right? So I don't want to go too bright, okay? So I'm gonna start here, okay? And then we're gonna let this drip. Come back over it with our brush. Sometimes you just and we just want it to drip all the way down and bring that nice warm rust. I could sit and watch that all day. I think it's so pretty. But I like that. Do you kind of see what I'm going for? And maybe you don't. Hang on. You'll get there. Or we'll get there. This is all about building our layers. All right, well that's dripping. I think we need to add a little bit of a base tone up at the top because I feel like that's lacking a little bit. So I'm gonna take the Sundance, which is our really intense orange, and we're gonna let that drip at the same time the rest is. So we're just gonna take this up top. And there's a little bit of rust on my brush, or I'm sorry, Mandarina. There's a little bit of Mandarina on my brush. Okay. Yeah, that'll give some warmth. Ah! I spilled that on my table. That will give us a little bit of warmth. Okay. Like a glow. That's what we're kind of going for, is this warm glow underneath. Almost looks like a galaxy. It's kind of rad. All right, I'm gonna go around the sides and add the same warm glow. I'm gonna add a little bit of Mandarina at the bottom and a little bit of the Sundance, that intense orange, to the top. It's time to start adding some metallics. So first I'm going to stipple a little bit of copper on, kind of create my flow. And then I'm just going to dry brush it out. So I'm doing those little circles and really just bringing that copper out to cover the whole area that I want. Some more copper here. And then I'm just gonna pull it down. Because I kind of want like almost like a streak, okay? So the center I'm gonna pull down farther. Just let my brush really pull down. And then I'm going to slowly overlap. Oops. I'm just going to kind of stipple this out just to soften it a little bit. This is really just to kind of soften that shape a little bit. Oh yeah, now we're getting there. Let's add some of these kind of reflections like we did up top, the bounce back. Let's add some of that coming down in here. I just kind of, I'm just gonna use my, there, yeah, I like that. Just kind of bounces that reflection off of it. There we go. Okay. And then we'll bring a little bit down here to the bottom. And we're going to put a little bit more probably than we want to show, because remember, we still have to add our blacks and browns and really tone down this wild color. We are going to add in some native clay over here. So kind of what I'm thinking is we've got our cooler tones down here, we've got some blues, and we're gonna kind of warm it up, give some native clays, some iron oxide, and then we'll lead into our, you know, really colorful part. That's my plan. So I'm just gonna take my native clay and I'm gonna start right here. And then just slowly kind of brush out from that. We're ready to make it more earthy, so I'm adding chocolate, and this is where I'm going to add my chocolate, and then I'm going to stipple on some carbon, and I'll slowly dry brush that out and kind of smoke out the piece. This is going to leave our vibrant colors underneath, but we're going to get that nice smoky effect and the warmth of the chocolate and the coolness of the carbon or black. You can use either one. All right, so I finished up with our chocolate. I added a little bit of carbon, and I just did kind of the same thing that I did with the chocolate. Added it a little bit heavier here and just kind of dry brushed and brought that carbon up. I also added just a tiny bit of dry brush up here in the corners and a little bit up at the top in there. So we are getting kind of that smoky burnt feel throughout the piece. But then if you look down, you can still see quite a bit of that sapphire. So I have a lot of sapphire in my base, and I'm really, really, really liking that. So I think especially when we put on the top coat, it's gonna pop and be really pretty. So I am now to the stage where I wanna add some of that rust, right? That iron oxide kind of rust in there. And so I'm gonna use my pointy sister. This one is the F14 pointy sister, but I like these because they have that nice little point, so they're nice to get into the corners and things. And then I've got my water. So I'm gonna do a little bit of dripping with this, and I'm gonna kind of start my rust, you know, somewhere in this area, So to kind of get me started, I'm gonna come right over the top of this metallic copper, and I'm gonna let that just drip kind of right over the top. So this is gonna start to warm up the areas around the copper and kind of help to give it more of that overall glow without adding more copper. Because I don't really want to add more until I'm starting to hit it with my palette knife. So we are really just kind of warming up the area, and iron oxide is the perfect color to do that with because it's almost like a copper tone without the metallic. It's kind of the same warmth. So I just have a little bit of the iron oxide on there. And my brush is just a little bit damp. I'm loving this smokiness that's taking place, and really it's just from adding a little bit of iron oxide and a wet brush. So I'm just spraying my brush a little bit, and then first I'm kind of just seeing if I get the paint wet, if it will kind of let me blend it, because it's not all the way cured and it's not sealed. So even though it's dried, I'm just kind of going back over with just a wet brush and seeing if I can just soften up that dry brush blending and just make it a smoother blend, but I still want to be able to see all the colors underneath. Do something kind of fun, because when I was dripping my water, the light kind of caught the water and some of it kind of splattered, and I could see like a little bit of a splatter pattern, and it just looked really cool with the light, just the water. So I thought, okay, just add in a little color, because this is so intense, especially next to this that we have going on. I wanted to add a little bit more of a little reflection, a little color in the bottom, but keep it really dark. So I'm using red rock, and I just put a little bit down here and then just kind of sprayed it. Soften that up a little bit with my finger. And then I'm just gonna put it right over here as well. So it's just the two spots. But see how that it kind of glows and almost looks a little bit, I don't know, just like a warm, almost like a little bit of a warm glow from a fire or something, especially once it gets, you know, kind of dripping and it's very, it's not as opaque. Yeah, I think I'll soften that up just a little bit, but I kind of like how it just kind of bounces your eye back up instead of going all the way down. You go down, then you kind of bounce back up. That's kind of cool, right? I need to add a little bit of patina, and so I could use the deep turquoise from Oiselle, But I happen to have this one sitting right here, so I'm just gonna use it. It's pretty similar, a little bit different color. And it's Patina Effects Paste from Redesign with Prina. This area, my little finger. I'll kind of bring it up a little, and then we'll spray it down. Soften up that brush mark. Yeah. I like that. I like just a little bit of patina. I feel like it kind of draws you in a little bit, which I think is nice. And just a little bit of drip. It will be very subtle. Probably add just a little bit here. And a little bit here. Okay. I might add just a little bit towards the bottom. Oh, it's so good. All right, I'm gonna keep going. I decided to go back and on our stenciling, where I had done all the blending, color overlay and everything, I still wanted that to show in the background, but I wanted the stencil area, the raised area, to look a little bit more like cracked because it was fired, right? And so I took the stencil back over it and then I just dry brushed with a black lightly, and then it really made the stencil stand out, but it left all of the work that I had done to build that base still there. So now I'm just adding a little bit of our mermaid sparkle, and we are just going to make some of these textured areas start to kind of pop a little bit. And really let that texture kind of... I decided to seal this piece in a combination of furniture salve and tonic, and unfortunately my camera malfunctioned and I didn't get it recorded. But that's what I used. You can use varnish, salve, 1 hour enamel clear. You can use any of that to seal with.